"You posted for a nanny," the woman said, "but I brought a crib." Nash Calder blinked at the figure on his front porch. Not a petite woman in floral scrubs holding a warm casserole dish. Not a retired kindergarten teacher with a soft voice and a pocket full of stickers. No, this one wore black cargo pants. A fireman's jacket faded by time and had a scar that ran down one forearm like a bolt of lightning frozen in skin. And in her right hand, a disassembled toddler crib slung over one shoulder like it weighed nothing. In her left, a duffel bag, so battered it could have seen 2 wars. Name's Ivy. "Ivy Sloane," she added, adjusting the strap. "You posted about needing help." Nash opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again like an old engine that refused to turn over. "I did, but I think there's been some kind of no mistake," she said, dropping the crib gently on the porch like it was made of feathers. "It was your ad. I recognized the zip code." Behind him, something stirred. Tiny footsteps. Then, Wren, his 7-year-old daughter, peeked around the edge of his flannel shirt, her curls wild from sleep eyes wide with the kind of curiosity only children are allowed to express so freely. Ivy noticed her and crouched down. She didn't smile, didn't coo, just said "nice slippers," nodding to Wren's mismatched unicorn feet. Wren blinked. "One's missing a horn," she whispered. Ivy gave the faintest nod. "Battle damage. Happens to the best of us." Nash stepped in, reflexively shielding Wren. "Ivy, I'm sorry. I think I was expecting someone different, someone softer." The way she said it wasn't bitter, just honest. "I meant, it's all right." She stood, taller than Nash by a good inch. "I get that a lot." There was a silence. The kind that doesn't come empty but loaded thick with unsaid things, awkward truths, and the weight of 2 strangers trying to understand whether this was a beginning or a mistake. "You didn't even knock," Nash finally said. Ivy looked at him like that was the most irrelevant fact in the world. Didn't want to wake the kid. Nash had posted the ad 3 weeks ago on a tired parenting forum and a few neighborhood boards. Single father seeks part-time nanny. Must be gentle. Must love kids. Must be okay with tight spaces and tighter budgets. He wasn't expecting miracles, just someone who could help him keep Wren safe, fed, maybe even happy for a few hours a day while he cleaned up messes made by other people's kids. But this was not what he pictured. Still, she was here, standing on his porch like she belonged in an action movie, not a nanny interview. "Do you have references?" he asked. Ivy pulled out a folded piece of paper from her back pocket and handed it to him. It wasn't a resume. It was a single letter, handwritten. The signature at the bottom made Nash's stomach dip. Martha Sloane. The woman who had raised him for a year when his own parents couldn't get sober. A foster mother with strong opinions and stronger coffee. "I'm her niece," Ivy said quietly. "She passed 3 months ago, but before she did, she saw your ad online and sent it to me. Thought I should apply." Nash stared at the paper like it might catch fire in his hands. He hadn't thought about Martha in years. The idea that her hands, her signature, were somehow the bridge between him and this towering, scarred stranger felt surreal. "You knew her." "She raised me," Ivy said. "Same as you." Wren tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can we let her in?" "Just a little." He looked down. Wren rarely asked for things outright, not since Angela died, but here she was staring not at him but at Ivy, not with fear, with fascination. And Nash realized Wren had seen dozens of babysitters come and go, all sweet, all kind, all too careful. None of them had ever said "nice slippers." He stepped aside. "We've got coffee, if you drink it." Ivy nodded, once scooped up the crib again and walked in like she'd always known the floorboards. She didn't stare, didn't comment on the peeling wallpaper or the half-painted bookshelf or the dishes soaking in the sink. She just set the crib down in the corner, took a deep breath, and looked around like a firefighter assessing a burn zone. Wren trailed behind her. "Do you like ballet?" the girl asked. Ivy paused. Never tried. My coordination's better suited to punching than pirouetting. Wren giggled a sound so rare Nash almost dropped the coffee pot. I can teach you, she said. You'd do that? Ivy raised an eyebrow. Wren nodded solemnly. But you have to wear sparkly socks. I've been through worse. Later that afternoon, after Wren had wandered back to her room to play, Nash found Ivy on the back porch assembling the crib piece by piece with the kind of precision only seen in surgeons and soldiers. You move fast, he said. Old habit, station life. You were a firefighter. 7 years. Why'd you leave? Ivy didn't look up. Some things burn longer than others. The quiet that followed wasn't uncomfortable. Just acknowledged. He sat beside her, watched her hands tighten a bolt. There were scars along her knuckles. Faded tattoos peeked beneath her sleeve. She was muscle and steel and something else, something soft beneath all that armor like the center of a well-worn rope. You really want this job? He asked finally. It doesn't pay much. I'm not here for the money. Then why? She tightened the last screw, wiped her hands on her pants, and said, Because Martha believed in you. And because that little girl. She looked at me like I wasn't broken. That night, as Nash peeked into Wren's room and saw her fast asleep with a smile on her face for the first time in weeks, he realized something unsettling. He didn't know if Ivy Sloane was the right person for the job, but somehow she was already doing it, and that more than resumes, interviews, and background checks might just be the scariest thing of all. The first thing Ivy did the next morning was pull a jump rope out of her duffel bag and start skipping in the kitchen. At 5:04 a.m., to the thwack of rope on tile, Nash stumbled in wearing mismatched socks and holding an empty mug like it was a weapon of war. He stopped in the doorway, blinking at the scene Ivy in a plain black tank top scar running clean down her shoulder, jumping rhythmically as if the air owed her a debt. Wren, still in unicorn pajamas, sat cross-legged at the kitchen table, eyes wide as she munched dry cereal from a mug. She said, This is her warm-up, Wren whispered as if afraid to interrupt the ritual. Ivy didn't pause. Discipline is oxygen, she said between breaths. Without it, you suffocate slowly. Nash squinted. Do you always start your day like this? Only on days ending in Y. He stared at the coffee pot as if hoping it might make itself. We usually ease into things around here. Ivy stopped, caught the rope midair, and turned to face him. Then maybe it's time to try something different. By 7:30, Ivy had folded all the laundry into symmetrical stacks that would put a military inspection to shame. She'd fixed the squeaky back door hinge, reorganized the pantry, and built a shoe rack from old broom handles she found in the shed. Nash, meanwhile, had spent the morning trailing her like a man watching a storm reorganize his furniture. He didn't know what unsettled him more, the fact that she'd done all of it without asking, or that none of it felt wrong. Wren certainly didn't mind. She followed Ivy around like a glitter-covered shadow. By mid-morning, the two were sitting on the porch painting pine cones into mythical creatures. Ivy called hers a battle owl. Wren made a ballerina dragon. Nash stood in the doorway with a sandwich half-eaten in his hand, trying to process the scene. This, whatever this was not how normal days looked in the Calder house. Normally, mornings were quiet, slow, silent, like grief pressed into routine. Now they had pine cones with eyelashes. That afternoon, Ivy stood at the kitchen sink scrubbing an old saucepan like it owed her answers. Nash leaned against the counter, arms crossed, trying to sound casual. You don't talk much about where you're from. I'm from everywhere people don't want to stay. That a metaphor, or I've lived in 18 cities, she said, not looking up. 4 states, 2 foster homes, and 1 firehouse that felt like home until it didn't. Nash blinked. That's a hell of a resume. I don't write it down. But the ashes stay with you. She finally looked at him, eyes calm but sharp. And you don't talk much about Angela. Nash flinched just a little. Not from anger, from recognition. Because when I do, Wren looks like the world's falling apart again. Ivy dried her hands on a rag and turned to face him. Maybe she needs someone to teach her how to look at broken things and still see strength. There it was again. That voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. Not sentimental, not distant, just honest enough to make silence feel cowardly. Nash stared at the floor. "You're not what I expected." Ivy tilted her head. "I'm not what anyone expects. But I'm still here." It was Thursday afternoon when the whispers began. Dana Wexley, queen of the PTA and master of Midwestern diplomacy, showed up at the school gate just as Nash was locking up the mop closet. She wore a blazer too pressed for the weather and a smile too bright to be innocent. "I heard about your new arrangement," she said, like she was talking about a questionable sofa from Craigslist. Nash didn't flinch. "Ivy, she's helping out with Wren. She's very tall. Is that a crime now?" She was seen in the cafeteria teaching a group of kids how to punch imaginary attackers in the throat. She calls it self-defense through awareness. Dana leaned in. Her voice dropped sweet as poison. "Parents talk, Nash. They worry. You know how delicate kids can be, especially ones who've lost stability." There it was, the real jab, delivered with a smile. Nash didn't answer right away. He just looked past her out at the schoolyard where Wren was giggling, giggling, as Ivy helped her balance on a stack of gym mats. Wren's arms flailed. Ivy didn't catch her. She just stood close enough that Wren could fall safely. "She's the first person Wren's laughed with in months," Nash said softly. "So, if you want to report that, go ahead. But do it, knowing she's the only one who didn't try to bubble wrap my daughter's grief." Dana's lips pressed together. "I'm just saying, appearances matter." Nash locked the door and turned to face her. Only to people who can't see deeper than surface level. That night, Wren fell asleep with her head on Ivy's lap, a crayon still clutched in her hand. Ivy didn't move, just sat still as stone, one hand resting lightly on the girl's shoulder like she'd done this 100 times before, like she knew what it meant to guard someone's sleep. Nash stood in the hallway watching them in the quiet glow of the living room lamp. For a second, he let himself imagine what this could be, not just a temporary fix, not just a job, a team. A strange, lopsided, miraculous team. Then Ivy looked up and met his gaze. "You're thinking too loud," she said. "I do that." "Don't." He nodded slowly. "Do you ever knock nope? Why not?" She looked down at Wren and answered softly. "Because if someone needs help, the door should already be open." "You know," Ivy said, squinting down at Wren's ballet shoes like they were alien technology. "These things look like they were made to hurt." "They are," Wren replied solemnly, standing on tiptoe in the hallway. "Miss Darlene says beauty always costs something." Ivy raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like something people say when they want you to bleed pretty." From the kitchen, Nash called, "No military metaphors during ballet hour, please." "Then you better not watch what comes next," Ivy muttered. Wren had been chosen for a solo. No one saw it coming, least of all Nash, who nearly dropped his mop when the school secretary handed him the notice. Wren, his quiet, skittish girl who still flinched at the microwave beep. But apparently during dance class she'd surprised everyone, graceful, precise, a kind of sadness that turned every movement into poetry. "She doesn't dance like a child," Miss Darlene had whispered. "She dances like someone who's been trying to fly out of her own body." When Nash told Ivy that night, she didn't smile. She nodded once and said, "We better get to work." The next morning, Ivy cleared the living room, pushed back the couch, rolled up the rug. "You're building a war zone?" Nash asked, walking in with coffee. "Something like that," she said. "Except in this one, the mission is to keep your balance." Wren stepped in wearing her practice leotard and the ballet shoes that were one scuff away from retirement. Her ribbon was frayed, barely hanging on. "We start with stillness," Ivy said. "That's easy," Wren replied. Ivy shook her head. "Not silence. Stillness. The kind where your heart isn't trying to run ahead of your breath." Wren blinked. "I don't know how to do that." "Good," Ivy said. "Then we start from truth. For the next hour, Ivy taught Wren a routine that didn't look anything like ballet. It looked like breathing exercises, slow lunges, push-ups with whispered counts, and standing on one foot while blowing bubbles through a straw. Balance is. Breath, Ivy said. You lose your breath, you lose everything. Why? Bubbles Wren asked between gulps of air. Because it's impossible to panic and blow bubbles at the same time. Nash stood in the kitchen pretending to read the mail but watching everything. His daughter steadying herself on Ivy's forearms. Ivy whispering, "You've got this. Let the ground come to you." It was unorthodox, but it was working. Wren didn't stumble. She didn't rush. She breathed. That night, Ivy found Wren sitting on the porch steps, tying and untying the ribbon on her ballet shoes. "Is it weird," Wren said quietly, "that I feel safer when you're watching me?" Ivy sat beside her, not answering right away. "When I was your age," she finally said, "I got left at a grocery store. Foster mom number 2. Said it was an accident." Wren's fingers paused. "I waited 3 hours in the cereal aisle," Ivy said. "And I remember thinking, maybe if I stand still enough, no one will notice I'm alone." Wren turned to her eyes wide. "What happened?" "A clerk noticed. Called someone. Next thing I knew, I had a new bed, a new name, and a new bruise to hide." There was silence. Then Wren said, "You don't talk like other grown-ups." Ivy looked at her. "And you don't flinch like most kids." Another beat. Then Wren whispered, "When I dance." "I forget my mom died." And Ivy, without blinking, replied, "Then we dance for the forgetting. And for the remembering." The next day, Miss Darlene dropped by for a surprise rehearsal check. She stepped into the Calder living room in a cashmere cardigan and perfume that smelled like polished silver. She raised an eyebrow at the sight of Ivy leading Wren through what appeared to be a series of yoga poses and shoulder rolls. "This isn't traditional technique," she said, adjusting her clipboard. "No," Ivy replied, not missing a beat. "It's survival technique." Miss Darlene blinked. "Excuse me." Ivy stood towering slightly. "I'm not here to make her into a ballerina. I'm here to make sure she can stand on a stage and not shatter." Miss Darlene gave a tight smile. "We were hoping for a bit more grace." Grace, Ivy said, "Voice calm as ever isn't in how high you lift your leg. It's in how gently you land when the world drops you." That evening, Nash found Ivy in the garage sanding a splintered wood box. "She's improving," he said, leaning on the doorframe. "She's surviving," Ivy replied. "That's more important." He nodded, then hesitated. "Why are you doing this?" "Really," Ivy paused, the sander going still. "Because," she said slowly, "she looks at me like I'm not too much." Nash furrowed his brow. Too much, too loud, too tall, too strong, too scarred, too everything. Her voice didn't break, but it bent. Then she added quieter, "She sees a fighter, not a freak." Nash took a step closer. "And what do you see when you look at her?" Ivy didn't blink. "Hope. That doesn't flinch." The next morning, Wren stood in front of the hallway mirror dressed in her practice outfit. She stared at her reflection like it was a stranger she was still learning to trust. Ivy knelt beside her holding the tattered ribbon. Gently, she began tying it. Her fingers were calloused, the knuckles worn. But her touch careful, intentional. "Why do you always do it yourself?" Wren asked. "Because when someone else tied my shoes," Ivy murmured, "they always pulled too tight." A beat passed. Then Wren said, "You don't." Ivy looked up, met her gaze in the mirror. "No," she whispered. "I never will." And in that moment, soft, fragile, and suspended like breath between two heartbeats, Nash knew something irreversible had happened. This wasn't just training for a school recital. This was a girl reclaiming her footing in a world that had knocked her off balance. And this was a woman who knew exactly what that felt like and was quietly, fiercely making sure it wouldn't happen again. Nash had heard the sound before a breath caught mid-chest, thick and shallow, like someone remembering how to drown. It came from the hallway just past midnight low and ragged, pulsing like a warning through the quiet house. He rose from the couch, slowly, careful not to wake Wren, whose head lay on his lap, mouth slightly open in a peaceful, delicate snore. The light under Ivy's door was on. He knocked. Once. Soft. No answer. He turned the knob. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on her knees, hands clenched in her hair like she was trying to hold her own head together. The room smelled faintly of sweat and ash, not the fresh kind, but the memory of fire soaked into fabric and lungs. She didn't look up. "You have nightmares, too?" Nash asked gently, not stepping in yet. Her voice was low, almost hoarse. "You ever smell burning plastic in your dreams, Nash?" He didn't answer. "That's what gets you." She continued, her words measured. "Not the fire. Not the noise. The plastic. The way it melts. The way it clings." He walked in quietly, pulled the chair from Wren's desk, sat across from her. "Ivy," he said, careful not to touch. "Not yet, you're not in it anymore." She laughed, one bitter exhale. "That's the thing, Calder. You never leave it. You just walk around it long enough that other people forget it's still burning." There was a long pause. The air in the room was thick with the kind of silence that made even shadows uneasy. "I had a son," she said suddenly. Nash's breath caught. 7 months along. I was still on active duty. Didn't tell many people. Didn't want anyone to treat me like I was fragile. Her eyes were locked on the floor. That night, 3 calls came in. Structure fire, 2-story home. Children reported inside. I got there first. She swallowed. I found the girl, 6 years old, under the bed, holding her dog. I got her out, went back in for the brother. But the stairs collapsed. Nash didn't interrupt, didn't breathe. I broke my shoulder in the fall. Crushed ribs. When they pulled me out, they found the heartbeat was gone. She lifted her left hand, ran her thumb over a faint silvery scar on her wrist, barely visible unless you knew to look. I was supposed to name him Liam, and then no one ever called me Mom. Not even once. Nash had no idea how long they sat there in the dark. The air felt too still to move, too heavy to carry words. So he offered none. He just stayed. Eventually, Ivy leaned back against the wall, her breathing slowing, her eyes softening like someone finally allowed to feel tired. "You know what hurts worse than losing something?" she asked. "What being told you were never supposed to have it." Nash leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice steady. "You were supposed to have him. No, women like me, we don't get soft things. We get jobs in hard places. We get called intense, or too much, or intimidating. People hand us tools, not tenderness." "Ivy," he said, finally reaching across the space between them, resting his hand gently over hers. "Wren doesn't need softness. She needs safety. And that comes in all shapes." She stared at him for a long moment, eyes locked like a test. Then she exhaled, and it wasn't quite a sigh, it was surrender. Quiet, earned, complete. "You know," she said, "the first time I saw you, I thought, he'll never trust someone like me. And now I think you're the only person in this whole town who doesn't see me like a walking accident report." The next morning, Wren ran into the kitchen with a new drawing, a figure in a tutu standing on a stage with a tall woman in jeans beside her, arms folded, smiling. "That's you," she told Ivy, proudly pointing. "You're guarding the stage." Evie looked down at it for a long time. "Why am I frowning?" "That's not a frown," Wren said, confused. "That's your superhero face." Ivy blinked. Nash behind her smiled into his coffee. Later that day at the hardware store, Nash ran into Miles Cortez, the school principal. The man was kind, quiet, and usually stayed out of apparent drama, but today his face carried concern. "I got a couple of emails," Miles said, carefully walking with Nash past the paint section. "Some parents are unsettled. They say your new nanny looks like she could wrestle a bear." "She could," Nash replied. "Wren seems okay." She laughs now. Miles nodded. "That's worth more than 1,000 emails. But there's always a but." Miles admitted, "People don't like what they don't understand." Dana Wexley's been stirring things up again. Nash clenched his jaw. Of course she has. Miles paused. Look, I'm not telling you what to do, but if you're going to stand beside Ivy, just be ready. You're not just protecting your daughter anymore. You're holding space for someone a lot of folks don't think deserves it. Nash looked him square in the eyes. Then I'll hold it tighter. That night, Wren insisted on performing her routine for Ivy's solo music, playing softly from the old cassette player in the corner. Nash sat on the couch. Ivy sat on the floor, arms crossed over her knees, eyes locked in like a hawk. Wren danced like someone remembering how to live. No fear, no stumble. Her ribbons stayed tied. Her breathing stayed steady. When she finished, the room fell silent. Then Ivy said softly, "You danced like you owned your shadow." Wren beamed. Nash looked at Ivy and whispered, "You're teaching her more than you know." Ivy didn't look away from Wren. She just said, "She's teaching me too." Wren walked through the school hallway like she'd just walked off stage at Lincoln Center, chin-high ribbons fluttering, dreams visible. But dreams like glass can crack without warning. It started with a whisper. "Is that her? The big, scary lady? No way she's a real nanny. Looks like she could lift a car." And then came the laughter, sharp, nasal, cruel in the way only children who learned it from adults could be. Wren's steps slowed. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her tiny ballet bag. At the lockers stood Marcy Willoughby and her crew, all pink tights and pointed toes, the unofficial princesses of Ashton Grove Elementary. Marcy's voice was sugar dipped in spite. "You really think they'll let you solo in those shoes?" Wren looked down. Her ballet slippers were frayed at the edges. The right one had a tear so small most wouldn't notice, but Marcy noticed. She always did. "Don't worry," Marcy smirked. "Maybe your bodyguard Nanny can strong-arm the judges." The laughter that followed hit harder than any shove. That afternoon, Wren came home quiet. Too quiet. Nash noticed it right away. She didn't run to the kitchen for snacks, didn't ask to watch Charlotte's Web for the 10th time, just slipped into her room and closed the door. Ivy didn't say anything. Not right away. She waited. At 7:15 p.m., she knocked softly on Wren's door and peeked in. The little girl was curled up on the rug ballet shoes in her lap. She wasn't crying, not exactly, but her eyes were red, and that was worse. Ivy sat beside her, cross-legged. They laughed. Wren whispered. I heard Ivy said simply, "I don't want to dance anymore." Silence. Then Ivy reached out her hand. "Give them to me." Wren hesitated, then handed over the shoes, fragile fraying with tiny threads sticking out like they'd aged a decade in a week. Ivy turned one over in her calloused palms. She didn't insult them, didn't pity them, just looked at them like something worth saving. She stood up and said, "Come to the garage in 20 minutes. When Wren arrived, the garage smelled like sawdust and something faintly metallic. Ivy stood at the old workbench, a flashlight clamped between her teeth, threading thick red thread through a curved needle. "What are you doing?" Wren asked. Ivy didn't look up. "Fireman thread," she said, pulling it taut. "It doesn't burn, doesn't snap. You're fixing my shoes. With fireman thread, I'm remaking them. Stronger than before." She glanced sideways. No princess ever made it through a war in glass slippers. Wren crept closer, watching as Ivy's thick fingers stitched with surprising grace, each motion deliberate. Why, Red Wren asked. "Because scars deserve to be seen," Ivy said, "and because no one forgets the girl with the red thread." That night, Ivy stayed up long after Wren went to bed, polishing the soles with beeswax, reinforcing the torn leather. When Nash walked into the garage, he just stood there, watching her shoulders hunched, lips pressed tight, eyes focused like a surgeon. "She's already strong," Ivy said without looking at him, "but these will remind her." He nodded slowly. "You're good at this." "No," she replied. "I just remember what it felt like to be the one getting laughed at." The next morning, Wren opened her eyes to find the shoes at the foot of her bed. The red stitching was bold, not hidden, not ashamed. like battle armor for a ballerina. She didn't speak, just hugged them to her chest like something sacred. At breakfast, she looked at Ivy and asked, "Will you be there when I dance?" Ivy nodded. Wouldn't miss it. Wren turned to Nash. "Will you film it?" He smiled. "I'll bring 2 batteries." Later that week, as the school prepared for the spring performance, Dana Wexley cornered Nash outside the multi-purpose room. "I'm just going to say it, Nash," she said, flipping her clipboard like it was a legal document. "It's inappropriate to have a woman like her around the children." Nash crossed his arms. "Define like her." Dana didn't flinch. "She's aggressive, unorthodox." "I heard she yells. She speaks with conviction," Nash said. "There's a difference. She's intimidating. So is honesty." Dana narrowed her eyes. "Just know that when this explodes, and the board will remember who hired her." Nash didn't reply, but as he walked away, he whispered under his breath, "Let them remember." The day of the performance arrived with blue skies and hummingbirds. Wren wore a simple white leotard, her repaired shoes laced high. The red thread caught the sunlight like fire. Backstage, she stood alone for a moment, eyes closed, whispering to herself. Ivy crouched beside her. Scared, she asked. A little Wren admitted. "That's good. It means you care." Ivy adjusted the laces one last time. "Wren," she said gently, "when you dance like no one ever hurt you. And if you can't, dance like you're still healing anyway." Wren nodded, and then the curtain lifted. She moved like wind, like memory, like every girl who'd ever been told she wasn't enough. And when the final spin ended and she stood in the spotlight breathing hard, arms raised, no one clapped at first, because they were stunned. Then thunder. Parents, teachers, kids, even Dana, tight-lipped arms crossed, couldn't look away. And Ivy, standing at the back, blinked hard, her hands clenched so tight they trembled. Nash turned his camera off. He didn't need to record the applause. It was already written in every heartbeat. The lights above the Ashton Grove Auditorium flickered with anticipation. Parents shuffled in their seats, program booklets crinkling like nervous paper hearts. On stage, the backdrop of a pastel-painted garden waited in silence. And behind the curtain, Wren stood in her white costume gripping the repaired ballet shoes Ivy had stitched like a prayer. She wasn't nervous, not in the way she used to be, because this time she knew someone out there believed in her not for being perfect but for daring to try again. From the audience, Ivy sat in the third-row aisle seat, arms crossed, eyes tracking every movement behind the stage curtains. She didn't fidget, didn't smile, just watched like someone who'd once had to look away at the worst possible moment and swore never to do it again. Nash sat one row behind her phone camera, ready heart a tangled knot of awe and anxiety. His eyes flicked between Ivy and Wren like he couldn't decide who he was prouder of. Then the stage manager gave the nod. Cue the lights, cue the music, cue the moment that would change everything. Wren stepped into the glow, her form small but steady, a white silhouette under a canopy of amber spotlight. The audience hushed. First step, second. Arms lifted. A twirl like a whispered secret. Ivy's jaw softened. Nash barely breathed. And then a sound. Small, metallic, wrong. From above the stage, the lighting rig groaned. A loose bolt, unnoticed during setup, rattled free and skittered along the catwalk. The rig shifted an inch, then 2. A creak echoed across the auditorium. Ivy was on her feet before anyone else. One blink later, the steel crossbeam gave way. The beam didn't fall straight. It swung a brutal pendulum, slicing the air above the stage. Wren froze mid-pirouette as a shadow swept across her feet. In the crowd, someone screamed. And Ivy moved. There are moments in life where instinct outruns thought. This was one of them. She vaulted the orchestra pit, boots skimming the floor like lightning. In 3 strides, she was on stage, arms out, body curled around Wren like a shield. The beam struck with a crash that swallowed the music, a sickening thud of metal and flesh. And then silence. Gasps broke out like gunfire. Lights snapped on. Stagehands scrambled. Nash shoved through the aisle, tossing his phone aside, his voice cracking Wren. But Wren was safe. Curled in Ivy's arms, she was shaken, but untouched. Ivy wasn't. The steel beam had hit her right shoulder square on the sound of bone giving way, unmistakable. She didn't cry out. Just lay there, jaw clenched, one arm still wrapped tight around the child she wasn't even paid to love. Ivy Nash dropped to his knees beside her, hands trembling. "You need an ambulance." "I'm fine," she gritted out. "Wren, I'm okay, Wren." Whispered, tear-streaked but whole. A beat of silence. Then Ivy said, barely audible, "Good. That's all that matters." And finally, she let go. The news spread faster than facts. By the next morning, rumors ran wild. She tackled the light rig, tackled it. No, she pushed a teacher out of the way first. Hero complex. My sister said the janitor's daughter was being dramatic for attention, and the nanny just used it as an excuse. Dana Wexley was already on a warpath. She stood in front of the school board office with a manila folder and 3 printed emails from concerned parents. I'm sure she meant well, she told Principal Miles with a tone that dripped diplomacy, but reckless behavior like that cannot be overlooked. We are still a public school, not a war zone. She saved a child, Miles pointed out. She endangered dozens by interfering, Dana snapped. The police report said she wasn't authorized to enter stage space, and she broke protocol. Protocol doesn't comfort grieving parents, Miles replied softly. Dana's lips curled. Well then, let's not wait until we need comforting. At the hospital, Ivy sat upright in bed, one arm in a sling, the other resting on the folded blanket in her lap. Her face betrayed nothing, but her knuckles were white. Nash entered the room with a paper coffee cup and an apology he hadn't figured out how to say. He offered the coffee. She took it mostly out of mercy. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. He ignored that. "You saved her life. She would have moved. I didn't need to jump in like that." "You think too much and feel too little," Nash said, voice low. "And still you moved." Ivy didn't respond. He pulled a folded letter from his jacket. "The school sent this." She took it, scanned it once, and nodded. A formal notice. Ivy Sloane was to remain off school premises until further review. Pending investigation. "Thank you for your service." No signature. Just silence in print. She folded the paper once cleanly and placed it on the tray beside her. "Are you angry?" Nash asked. "No," Ivy said. "But you're not surprised." She looked at him then. Really looked. "I don't get to be surprised anymore, Nash. Not after how many doors I've watched close before I ever knocked." That night, Wren didn't sleep. She sat on the couch wrapped in Ivy's old flannel shirt, the sleeves too big, the collar smelling faintly of cedar and lemon soap. She stared at the door, waiting for something no one could promise. When Nash tucked her in, she whispered, "Is she coming back?" He didn't lie. "I don't know." "But she has to," Wren said, voice rising. "Why?" Wren's eyes welled. "Because she didn't just catch me." Nash leaned closer. Then what did she do? "She believed I'd dance again. Before I even believed it myself." Back at the hospital, Ivy sat in the dark, staring at her reflection in the window, a woman alone, shoulder-wrapped, future uncertain. But somewhere just faintly in the silence between heartbeats and headlines, she could still hear the music and the little girl's voice calling her name. "She saved my daughter." "And you're calling that reckless Nash's voice," echoed through the narrow school board conference room, bouncing off walls lined with PTA fundraising posters and dusty plaques no one had looked at in years. Across from him, Dana Wexley sat with her hands folded neatly over a printed agenda, her lips set in a smile so tight it could slice paper. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Principal Miles stood at the front, already sweating through his collar, flanked by a handful of board members, each one holding a copy of the incident report and the parental complaints Dana had so efficiently gathered. "She endangered herself," Dana replied smoothly, and by doing so distracted others, caused chaos, and violated school safety protocol. I'm sure her heart was in the right place, but this isn't a battlefield. It's a school. Nash took a step forward, palms flat on the table. She didn't cause the danger. She responded to it. The rig failed, and she reacted emotionally. And that's exactly the problem Dana cut in. Do we really want someone unpredictable around our children? Unpredictable? That word. It hung in the air like smoke from an old fire. Miles cleared his throat. Look, everyone, we appreciate what Miss Sloane did. No one here denies her courage. Dana raised a hand. This isn't about courage. It's about liability. Nash turned, scanned the room. Is anyone else hearing this? One by one, board members lowered their eyes to the table. The legal advisor glanced at the clock, and in the back of the room, Wren stood in silence, holding her tiny ballet shoes in both hands like they might fall apart if she let go. That morning, Ivy had received the letter. Not a call, not a meeting, just an envelope slipped under her hospital room door. White, thin, final. Not suspension, not termination. Worse. Pending resolution of parent-led safety review, you are requested to remain off all school-affiliated properties. Thank you for your service. No signature. No, how are you healing? Just exile written in Times New Roman. She read it twice, then folded it once, tucked it into her bag, and got dressed one arm at a time, pain or no pain. Because dignity doesn't ask if you're comfortable. It just walks out the door with you. Back at the meeting, Dana leaned into her closing statement. This is not personal, she said. It's about precedent. We set one now, or we send a message that someone untrained, even someone with trauma, can rush a stage during a school event and face no consequence. Nash looked at her like she'd spoken in another language. She didn't rush the stage. She caught my kid. She could have hurt more, Dana replied coolly. And what if she hadn't moved? Nash snapped. What if my daughter had been the one crushed under that rig? Would we be in this room? Would you still be talking about protocols? Dana shrugged like the hypothetical was inconvenient. Emotion doesn't change procedure, Mr. Calder. No, but it should change people. Miles rubbed his temple. We need to vote. A pause. Silence. The kind that stretches. Do we allow Ivy Sloane to return to her role pending full investigation, or do we request indefinite removal under District Safety Clause 4 to C? Nash's breath caught. He turned toward the door where Wren had been moments earlier. She was gone. He hadn't even heard her leave. The vote began. One hand raised, then another, then two more. By the time the fifth went up, Nash stopped counting. Ivy didn't cry. She didn't throw the letter, didn't call Nash, didn't demand an appeal. She just packed what little she had from the spare bedroom, the flannel shirt, the pocket knife she never used, the tiny wooden horse she'd carved but never gave to Wren, and walked to the edge of the park where she used to sit in the mornings with a mug of bitter coffee and a dog-eared novel she never finished. The bench felt colder now. The sky was the same, but the silence felt different. Like the world was trying not to breathe around her. For the first time in a long time, she let it all come. The guilt, the grief, the aching truth she'd buried for too long that even when you save someone, sometimes the world still punishes you for trying. That night, Nash found Wren curled up on the floor, the music box Ivy had made sitting quietly beside her. She hadn't wound it. She didn't want to hear the song if Ivy couldn't. I'm sorry, Nash whispered, kneeling down beside her. Wren didn't answer. He tried again. I did everything I could. No, you didn't, she said softly. Nash blinked. But you didn't tell them what she means to me. I did, he said. I fought. No, Wren turned, her voice clear but small. You told them what she did. You didn't tell them who she is. She lifted the tiny bronze ballet shoes from the music box. They think she's just someone who ran on stage, but she's the one who taught me not to be afraid to walk onto it. 3 days passed. Ivy didn't return. She didn't call. But she did mail something, a small wooden box, hand-carved, no note. Just initials etched on the bottom, IS. Inside was a music box. Same song, but slower. And nestled inside a second set of miniature ballet shoes. This pair split down the middle with one shoe etched Wren, the other Ivy. Back in the teacher's lounge, Dana Wexley sipped coffee like a queen sipping court victory. Across from her, Principal Miles stared out the window at a world that felt suddenly much grayer. "I hope you know," he said at last, "that not everything we vote on is right." Dana set her cup down with a click. Right and popular don't always match, but popular pays the bills. Miles didn't respond. He just looked out the window toward the school gate, where Nash Calder stood, with Wren, holding a petition, and behind them 27 parents, holding signs. Bring back. Ivy. Safety is action, not silence. Our kids deserve courage. The vote might have been behind closed doors, but the response, it was very, very public. The first day without Ivy felt like winter had returned overnight. Wren didn't speak that morning. Not when Nash made her pancakes. Not when he brushed her curls, tying them into a messy half-bun like Ivy used to. Not even when he offered her the purple socks with stars, her favorites. She just nodded or blinked. No tears, no tantrum, just silence. And silence when it comes from a child is never empty. It's heavy and loud in all the wrong places. She might just be upset, the school counselor said gently, hands clasped over her notepad. Give her time. Maybe get her to draw. Nash sat on the edge of the tiny office chair that made every adult feel like a child. He rubbed the back of his neck. She hasn't said a word in 3 days, he murmured. Not one. The counselor tilted her head. Has anything changed at home? He didn't answer at first. Because how do you explain a presence that wasn't supposed to matter, but somehow mattered more than you ever imagined? I let someone go, he finally said. Someone who made her feel safe. That night, Nash found Wren sitting in the hallway, her ballet shoes next to her untouched. The stereo was off. The music box Ivy had made, the one with the bronze shoes, was open but unwound. Instead, Wren stood barefoot in the center of the hallway, facing the mirror Ivy once used to fix her hair before school. And then, slowly, with aching precision, she began to dance. Not like a performance, not with grace, but with memory. Each move was clumsy, unfinished, but every pose was something Ivy had taught her, the bubble breathing, the stance with arms like soft shields, the balance on toes just strong enough not to fall. No music, no audience, just her, the floor, and the ghost of a woman who wasn't dead but felt gone. Nash leaned against the wall, heart folding in on itself. His daughter, who once couldn't say her lines in the school play, now danced in silence to keep someone alive in her heart. It wasn't grief, it was absence, and absence has no funeral. The next morning, Nash left for work earlier than usual. But instead of going straight to the school, he took a detour. A quiet brick building off Chestnut Avenue, a converted warehouse with faded letters above the door, Hope Bridge Center for Pediatric Rehabilitation. Inside, children in wheelchairs painted on easels. A teenager in a helmet laughed through speech therapy. And in the far corner, crouched beside a girl with leg braces, was Ivy. Her arm was still in a sling, but her other hand guided the girl's fingers across the keys of a toy piano, each note like a whisper of bravery. Nash didn't speak. Not at first. He just watched. Because that was the thing about Ivy Sloane, she didn't fill space. She lifted it. When she finally looked up, her expression didn't shift. No smile, no bitterness, just a quiet, tired understanding. You shouldn't be here, she said. I know. Then why are you? Because Wren isn't. Ivy stood slowly. What do you mean? She hasn't spoken since you left, Nash said. She hasn't smiled. She barely eats. She doesn't cry. She doesn't scream. She just dances. A flicker crossed Ivy's face, but she looked away. I can't fix that, she said. You already did, he replied, and then I let them take you from her. Ivy's voice hardened. You didn't fight hard enough. I know, Nash said again, and this time it cracked something open in both of them. They sat on a bench in the hallway. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Ivy broke the stillness. Do you know what it's like to be told you're too much of something too strong, too loud, too masculine, too dangerous? Nash looked at her. No, I've only ever been told I'm not enough. She let out a breath, not a laugh, not a sigh, something in between. That's what made Wren different, she said quietly. She didn't flinch. She didn't care if I looked like a real nanny. She just wanted someone who saw her. She still does, Nash said. She waits at the window every morning, just in case. Ivy clenched her jaw. I'm not going back. Why? Because I'm not safe for her. Not according to the people who vote, the ones who decide what motherhood should look like. You caught her when everyone else stood still, Nash said. That's what motherhood looks like to me. Ivy stood up. You don't get to choose now. Nash stepped forward. I'm not choosing for me. I'm choosing for her. She's not mine. She wants you to be. Ivy turned away, but not before he saw it, the shimmer in her eyes. That night, Wren still didn't speak. But Nash didn't push her. Instead, he turned on the music box and let it play. Slow, low, but steady. He watched her close her eyes. When the song ended, she whispered her first word in 4 days. One word. Just one. Mommy. He didn't cry. He couldn't, because some moments are too sacred for tears. He just whispered back, She heard you. The old truck rumbled through the rain windshield wipers, struggling to keep up as the city blurred past. Nash hadn't told anyone where he was going. He wasn't even sure himself until he passed the corner of Chestnut and 6th and saw the name again, Hope Bridge Center. He parked, sat in silence. The ribbon was in his pocket, creased soft from too many years in a drawer. Red, just like the thread Ivy had used to mend Wren's shoes. The same one she'd used to tie her hair when helping Wren practice ballet. He had no flowers, no speech, just the truth. And the truth didn't come wrapped in a bow. Inside the center, kids were painting again. Music floated softly from a Bluetooth speaker in the corner, the kind of melody that didn't demand attention, but held you gently if you listened close enough. Evie was kneeling beside a boy with leg braces, adjusting the straps on his walker with practiced hands. Nash didn't want to interrupt, but she saw him anyway. She always did. Her eyes flicked up, unreadable as ever. Did something happen? He shook his head. No emergency. Just something I should have said a long time ago. I'm working. I'll wait. She glanced at the clock, then nodded toward the hallway. 10 minutes. They sat again on the same bench. The one that had once felt like neutral ground now felt like sacred soil. Nash pulled the ribbon from his pocket. Held it up. I found this in the back of my drawer. Didn't even remember keeping it. Ivy stared. That's Wren's old practice ribbon. He nodded. The one you tied for her, the day before the recital. She folded her arms. Why are you here, Nash? He looked down at the ribbon. Let the silence stretch until words felt honest. Because you were right. I didn't fight hard enough. I let other people's fears speak louder than my own heart. Ivy scoffed gently. That's not why I left. I left because I'm not built for places like that. I scare people, Nash. I've always scared people, not Wren. Her jaw tightened. She misses you, he continued. But that's not why I came. He looked up. I came because I miss you. Ivy blinked. Once. Slowly. You don't know me, she said. I know you pulled a stage rig down with your shoulder so my daughter wouldn't get crushed. She's not my daughter. She wants you to be. Evie stood. Don't give me hope like that. I've had doors open just long enough to believe I belonged then. Slammed before I stepped through. I'm not offering you a door. Nash said, rising. "I'm asking you to stay. Not because we need a nanny, because we need you." He took a breath. "But because I've spent so long trying to fix what's broken. I forgot what it's like to build something whole." Ivy said nothing, but her hands, those calloused, battle-worn hands, trembled slightly as she reached for the ribbon. "I'm not soft, Nash," she whispered. "Good," he replied. "Soft things break too easily." She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something unguarded in her, something raw and terrified and brave. "You know what scares me most," she said. "It's not falling again. It's being loved in a way I don't think I've earned." "You don't earn love," he said quietly. "You accept it." Back at home that night, Nash opened the door to Wren's room. She was curled up, hugging her music box. The bronze shoes inside clicked slightly as it wound down. "Sweetheart," he said gently. She didn't move. He sat beside her on the bed, pulled the covers up to her chin. "I saw Ivy today." No reaction. She said she misses you. Still silence. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the ribbon, tied it gently to the foot of the bed. "If you want her to come back," he whispered, "all you have to do is ask." The next morning, Wren came downstairs already dressed, boots on the wrong feet, jacket, halfway zipped backpack slung sideways. "Where are you going?" Nash asked, startled. She pointed to the door. "To bring her home." The sun warmed the courtyard of Ashton Grove Elementary as parents filed into rows of folding chairs, their chatter low and respectful. It was graduation day, the kind that made mothers tear up and fathers clap too hard. Children fidgeted in little gowns, gold tassels slipping down over their eyes, while teachers bustled like stagehands before curtain. Nash stood in the back, hands clasped behind him. His shirt was pressed, his boots polished, but his chest a battlefield of nerves. Wren had insisted on dressing herself. Not in a dress, not in anything frilly or pastel. She wore Ivy's old gray field jacket, sleeves rolled up twice, and a pair of black leggings tucked into worn sneakers. On her head, a red ribbon tied off-center like Ivy always wore it. She looked like a soldier disguised as a child, and she walked like someone who knew what she had to do. Principal Miles stepped up to the microphone, smiling nervously. "We want to thank all the parents, guardians, and staff who've helped our students get to this beautiful milestone. And now, a special student would like to say a few words." That hadn't been in the program. Whispers rippled through the audience like a breeze through wheat. Dana Wexley turned around in her seat, eyebrows raised. Nash caught her look, half disbelief, half irritation. But Wren was already on the stage. She stepped to the mic. Didn't fidget. Didn't clear her throat. She just spoke. "My name is Wren Calder." Pause. "I didn't want to speak today. I didn't think I had anything to say. But then I remembered something Ivy once told me." She looked out over the crowd, small but unshaking. She said, "If you're scared to stand, it means something in you is strong enough to carry fear." Murmurs. Wren's voice grew clearer. "Ivy's not here today. Not because she doesn't care, but because some people decided she was too loud, too strong, too much." Now it was dead silent. She jumped between me and a falling light. She didn't think, she didn't ask, she just caught me. A long breath. And then they asked her to leave. Nash watched Dana shift in her seat. Arms crossed, jaw tight. Wren wasn't done. "If someone catches you when you fall, listens when you don't speak, and fixes your shoes with red string and no complaints, is that someone allowed to be your mom?" Gasps in the crowd. "If that person tucks you in even when she's sore and calls you kiddo, like it means something real, can you call her mommy, even if she didn't give birth to you?" Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Wren smiled, just barely. "I think so. And I think it's okay if not everyone agrees. But I wanted to tell you, because today's not just about finishing school. It's about saying who we want to be." She reached into her jacket pocket, held up a tiny music box, carved wood, worn smooth. I want to be someone who remembers the ones who stayed when it mattered most." She turned to Miles. "And I want Ivy Sloane to be allowed back, because I'm not graduating without her." The courtyard erupted. Some stood and clapped. Some covered their mouths. Some cried openly. Parents who had once nodded along with Dana now looked at the ground. Miles adjusted his glasses. Dana stood. Her voice trembled not with emotion, but control. "This is not the time." But a hand touched her shoulder. Another parent, eyes red, gently shook her head. Let it be Dana. Wren left the stage without a bow. No grand gesture. Just a girl in an old jacket walking back to her father like she'd just declared peace after a long war. Nash knelt. "You didn't have to do that." "I did." He looked at her. "You think they'll let her come back?" Wren thought for a moment, then said simply, "Doesn't matter. I said it loud enough so she'd hear even if she wasn't here." But she was there. Ivy stood behind the trees at the far end of the courtyard, unseen by most. Her hands trembled on the fence lips, parted, eyes burning. She hadn't meant to come, had only driven by to drop something off at the front office. But when she'd seen the courtyard filling up, she parked and stood in the shadows. Now she couldn't move, because that little girl had just broken something open in her. Not pain, not grief, but a new kind of ache, hope. When the crowd began to break apart, Nash looked toward the street and saw her, only her eyes peeking over the fence line. She started to turn away. He raised a hand, not to stop her, but to tell her, "I saw you. I heard you. I'm still here." She froze, for the first time in a long time. She waved back. The hallway smelled faintly of pinewood and lemon polish. Not hospital-grade sterile, but clean in the way a place of quiet recovery should be. Outside, summer sunlight filtered through trees, scattering gold flecks onto the walkway leading to the Children's Therapy Center. Nash stood at the glass doors, heart beating harder than he remembered it ever doing, not even when Wren had taken her first steps. In his hand, not flowers, not a card, just a red ribbon frayed at the edges, tied into a clumsy little loop. He almost turned back. Then he saw her. Ivy was in the far room, kneeling on a soft mat next to a boy trying to balance on one leg. She held her hands up like a frame around him, not touching, just guiding. Her shoulders, still healing from the incident at school, tensed every time the boy wobbled. But she smiled through it. Not the forced kind. The kind that made you think she might just belong in this world after all. When the boy finally managed to hold the pose for 3 full seconds, Ivy tapped his chin and whispered, "Told you, you've got fire in you." That's when she looked up, saw Nash. Her smile froze just for a second. Then she stood slowly, her posture cautious, her breath measured. He walked in. No preamble, no dramatic music. Just the sound of his boots on the tile and the ribbon in his hand fluttering faintly with every step. "I don't know how to do this the right way," he said quietly, "but I figured if anyone understood, it'd be you." She tilted her head, guarded. "I didn't ask for flowers," she said. "I didn't bring any. I didn't ask to be forgiven." "I'm not here to forgive," he replied. "I'm here to ask." She blinked. "Ask what?" He stepped closer, holding out the makeshift loop clumsily tied uneven on both sides. "You told Wren once that being soft didn't come from hands," Nash said. "I think you were wrong." He looked down at his own fingers, rough, calloused. "I think softness comes from what we choose to hold, and what we choose to let go." Her eyes flickered to the ribbon, then to him. He cleared his throat. "I can't promise anything fancy. No house with white fences. No diamonds. Hell, I'm just a janitor with a mortgage and a lunchbox that still smells like bleach." She gave a soft, amused breath, but said nothing. Nash continued. "But if you're willing, if you'll have me, I'd be proud to be the guy who sweeps the floors of your life, every cracked tile, every mess, every ordinary day." He paused. "And Wren. She doesn't need a perfect mother, just someone who catches her when the lights fall, Someone who knows that healing doesn't look like a Band-Aid. It looks like a music box. And a red ribbon. Silence. The kind of silence that didn't press, it waited. Then Ivy whispered, "You sure you want this?" "No," he said honestly. "I'm terrified." She raised an eyebrow, but he added, "I've spent years waiting for life to stop hurting before I let it begin again. And now I think maybe healing and hurting happen at the same time." Her voice was barely there. "You don't even have a ring." He looked at the ribbon in his hand, then slowly, carefully knelt on one knee. "I figured if I tied it around your finger, maybe that'd count." Ivy stood completely still. Then she reached out her hand. He slid the ribbon over her ring finger, tightening it with all the care of a man rebuilding something sacred from the scraps of the broken. "I never liked jewelry anyway," she whispered. Nash looked up at her eyes, damp. "Will you marry me, Ivy?" She didn't answer with words. She bent down, cupped his face, and kissed him. A long, trembling kiss that carried every unsaid thing between them. Every sleepless night. Every whispered prayer. Every quiet act of love they thought no one would ever see. A soft voice broke the silence. "You didn't say yes yet." Wren stood at the doorway, her arms crossed like a mini soldier, but her eyes shining. Ivy laughed through a tear. "Well, then," she said, kneeling down, "I guess I'd better answer properly." She looked Nash in the eyes. "Yes. 1,000 times, yes." Wren grinned. "Good, because Mommy Ivy sounds way cooler than just Ivy." The next morning, Ivy moved back into the house. She didn't unpack much. She didn't need to. All the important things were already there. The next few months weren't perfect. They still had hard days, therapy sessions, court visits for paperwork, letters to schools, and awkward conversations with neighbors who still whispered too loud. But at night, when the house quieted, you could hear the faint hum of a music box from Wren's room. And sometimes, if you stood in the hallway long enough, you'd catch Nash and Ivy dancing barefoot in the kitchen, no music, just the rhythm of their breathing. Two imperfect people. One extraordinary little girl. And a ribbon that held more meaning than gold ever could. Final scene. Rain misted the sidewalk like confetti too shy to fall. Nash held the umbrella, but Wren kept ducking out from under it, trying to catch the drizzle on her tongue. Ivy walked beside them, her coat zipped high, a red ribbon tucked into the breast pocket. "Where are we going again?" Wren asked. Ivy looked down, grinning. "To return something." Nash raised a brow. "Return what?" She pulled out the tiny music box and smiled. "Faith. Someone gave it to me a long time ago. I think it's time I gave it back." The three of them turned the corner, no destination in sight, no map in hand. Just love. Real. Messy. Redemptive. The kind that doesn't arrive in perfect packages, but still finds its way home. And maybe that's all love really is. Not grand gestures, not perfect timing, but two imperfect hearts, choosing each other again and again until it feels like home. If this story touched something deep inside you, tell us where you're listening from. Whether it's a quiet kitchen in Texas, a rainy balcony in Scotland, or a cozy room somewhere in the Philippines, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your city, your heart, your thoughts, it all matters here. And if you believe the world needs more stories like this, more kindness, more hope, more second chances, then don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because the next story might be the one your heart's been waiting for. Thank you for spending this time with us. From our little storytelling corner to yours, we see you, we appreciate you, and we can't wait to meet again in the next chapter. Until then, stay kind, stay brave, and remember, even broken things can carry the light.